Lizzie Goliath, but we do have a quorum for the public hearing. So the first order of business will be the election of a committee clerk. So do I have a nomination? Alderman Wilshire?
I would move to nominate Alderman at Large Michael B. O'Brien Sr. to be committee clerk.
Okay. Alderman O'Brien has been nominated. Are there any other nominations? Seeing none, do I have a motion to close nominations? Alderman Wilshire?
Move to close nominations.
Okay, the motion on the floor is to close nominations. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Now we have to do a vote on all those in favor of Alderman O'Brien being the committee clerk for 2018 and 19. Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
See, you were assuming victory.
I would like to thank you all for this honor.
Okay, and the entire Budget Review Committee is also in attendance. So this evening, we do have a public hearing on Resolution R-18-001 and R-18-003. Before after the public hearings, rather, we will then have a short recess, and then we will open the Budget Committee meeting, and we'll vote on the actions before the Budget Committee, which includes R-18-001 and R-18-003. So as provided in NRO R-5-28, we'll allow, before each public hearing, a brief explanation and overview of the resolution. And after that, I will then call for each of the resolutions separately, testimony in favor of the resolution, and then after that, I will ask for testimony in opposition to the resolution. I will then ask again for people that want additional comments in favor and then in opposition. So there are probably a lot of people that will want to speak. So I would ask the speakers to come up, try to be succinct as possible. If someone before you has said what you were going to say, you can say that you agree with the previous speaker, or if you want to add something, feel free. But there are a lot of people that would probably like to speak. Okay. Again, we will now have the public hearing on R-18-001. And the mayor is going to open up the explanation of the resolution. Mayor
All right,
Bonchis?
well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And as by way of a brief introduction, I wanted to introduce the people first who are going to be making the presentation in support of the resolution. First, we have Duncan Webb, who is the consultant, and I would ask that he come up and sit in one of the empty chairs here. He's going to go through the slide presentation. Of course, we have Tim Cummings, who is the Economic Development Director, who will be here as a resource. And then we will have two more brief people to speak as part of the city's presentation. We have Peter Ramsey, who is the head of the Palace Theater. Maybe he could, when the time comes, maybe he could, when the time comes, he's about to stand up, but you could come up to the microphone. And we have Alan Chong, I believe, from the Courier, who I think I saw come in despite the very icy weather. But just as background and for some brief introduction, Mr. Chair, the city retained Duncan Webb pursuant to a vote of the Board of Aldermen or the Finance Committee before I became mayor in 2015. He was engaged with funds, city funds, and funds from the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation. He began on phase 1 of the feasibility study early in 2016. That took about 6 months, and he can explain what that entailed. And then he was engaged with city funds to conduct phase 2 of the feasibility study, which began in January of 2017 and continued through mid-year. But Mr. Chair, the overall purpose of the Performing Arts Center, as proposed, is not only to provide performance and entertainment opportunities for the people of Nashua in this region, but most importantly, to promote the growth of our economy, to promote jobs, and to promote building a stronger tax base, especially in our downtown. All of the things that we are doing in the downtown work together to improve property values and to create greater economic activity. And those include the new housing that's going up on Franklin Street and at Renaissance, and the new housing that is being proposed by the Clock Tower development. Those include all of the activities undertaken by GAD, by Paul Shea and his organization, in terms of music festivals and the stroll and all of the other things that are going on throughout the year. Those activities have increased substantially in the last couple of years since Mr. Shea took over that organization. And of course, the additional Performing Arts Center and Performing Arts Center on Main Street at the corner of Pearl would also contribute to this. And as I mentioned, we are trying to make all of these things work together to create a stronger, better economy. We are definitely seeing new private investment in the downtown. On Franklin Street, where the mill to housing conversion is taking place, that probably represents about a $20 million investment by the private sector. The Renaissance development, which has been in the works for 10 years or so, but is now coming to fruition, close to the downtown or part of it, represents another probably $15 million of private sector investment. Now the Clock Tower project, the Clock Tower owners are proposing to convert the Picker building to 60 units of new housing, and at least have presented plans to suggest that they may be willing to proceed with the construction of entirely new housing in the mill yard, a new building. That's the first time an actual new structure for housing has been built in the downtown. If it takes place in maybe a century, it's hard to measure that. And that would be another 60 units. So those investments together would be another $12 million of private investment. Plus, our economic development department is talking with others regarding certain proposals that are more in the development stages, but those could entail additional private investment. And the idea here is to use the public sector to leverage these private investments and to stimulate more in order to expand the downtown tax base. In the central business district, which is only 1/4 of a square mile, encompassing really Main Street and a block or two on each side and the mill yard, we collect $6 million of property tax revenues. It is a very property tax intense area of the city, which because very few services are required downtown, very few school children and the like, subsidizes services that we provide to all of the neighborhoods of the city, and subsidize schools and all of our other services. If we can attract more investment, like the ones that I've already mentioned, and in addition to that, through additional economic activity, we can increase the value of the existing downtown properties. We can grow the $6 million to 8 or 10 or some larger figure that in the end will more than pay for the costs of a performing arts center. So, Mr. Chair, that is kind of the basic economic rationale of this proposal. But rather than hear more from me, I think the best thing now is to go to Duncan. And where is Duncan? Oh, yes, here's Duncan Webb. I don't know if you've met, some of you have met him before, but not everyone. He has a set of slides that he will go through in order to give you the history and the thinking regarding this proposed project.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Committee members, thank you for inviting me back to summarize the work that we've done to help you make this important decision about moving forward with new performing arts facilities for Nashua. Some of you might recall I'm a management consultant in the cultural sector. I've spent 30 years roaming around the country helping cities and developers and arts organizations think about investing in culture and cultural facilities. Since I was last here, we've started and done two interesting projects in the region. We just finished doing an economic impact study in Lynn, studying the economic impact of a mural festival that they hosted over the summer. And just last month, we started a cultural plan for the city of New Bedford, Massachusetts, which reminds me a little bit of Nashua because it's another community that is increasingly coming under the influence of that larger metropolitan area and has many of the same issues that you do. So we were here in 2001, many years ago, first looking at this idea. We were pleased to come back these 15 years later, and tonight I'm going to summarize that work for you. Really, this is about affirming the case for a new performing arts center based on why it's a good idea, where it can and should be located, what it will cost you to develop, and how it is financially sustainable on an ongoing basis. So this idea of a performing arts facility has been around for a long time, and frankly, this is the case in many of the communities we work in, that there's an idea that sort of bumps along and has various sort of efforts tied to it, but sort of finally gains momentum because of the political environment and the economic environment combined with the artistic argument to develop something. So we were pleased to come back in here in 2016 and affirm the case for these facilities. The first part of that study was just, does it make sense to do anything, and if so, what? And the second part of it was, what does that mean? What are the physical, operational, and financial implications of doing that work? So in that first part, whenever we're looking at this idea of facilities, we're asking and answering four questions. First of all, is there an audience? So who would attend, who lives here, who works here, who visits here? What do they like? What do they want? And is there propensity and capacity in the market to support facilities? We concluded that the market is sort of stratified, but generally positive. You have Nashua itself, fairly dense urban area, but then the 15-mile radius and the 30 and the 40-mile radius from which we think a facility here can draw audiences is big, is growing, and has many of the demographic features that suggest participation. In addition, you have a growing sort of non-resident market of the development of tourism, and particularly cultural tourism, which would benefit a project like this. We looked at the existing supply of facilities serving the market. You might remember this matrix that looks at the capacity of venues on the horizontal axis against the quality on the vertical axis. And you can see in the upper right quadrant the dearth of larger capacity, high quality venues serving this area. The most important element was testing demand. Oh, I'm sorry. The other part of supply was we identified, again, this very interesting and important demand for meeting and event space in the community. And we feel that a new facility like the one we're proposing can respond to that demand as well as responding to traditional nonprofit performing arts and touring arts and entertainment demand. So we've thrown that idea into the pot because we think there's something there that would make this project busier and more sustainable and more sort of integrated into the life of your community. The hardest part is testing demand on the part of users. So looking at artists and arts organizations and others, because the building doesn't exist for several years yet, and it's very hard to pin down a small nonprofit and say, all right, how many nights are you good for, and are you going to be able to pay this rent? Nevertheless, it's a good barometer of the level of demand. So we did it once when in the needs assessment in 2016, and we came back and did it again last year within a charrette where we got all the groups together. We put blank calendars on the table, and we really tried to get a stronger sense of demand given the possibility of rent and other sort of elements of operating policy. And then finally, we looked at the fourth issue is always, how does a project like this advance your larger goals? Where are you trying to go as a community, and how do new performing arts facilities get there? And in that regard, we went back to the Nashua Arts and Cultural Plan in 2015 and saw that there are a number of issues around identity, education, commerce, marketing, and centralization that we can respond to with a project like this. So it is absolutely in alignment with some of these goals. So we concluded that the market is diverse and it has generally the capacity and propensity to support new facilities. There are gaps in the existing inventory of facilities. There is demand for performance space, large and small, and also classroom space. And new facilities align with the goals identified in and for the city. So we recommended, we presented a series of options and worked through them with you all and came back to this idea of the one sort of larger piece, a 500 to 700 seat flexible arts and event center. So it's not a pure performing arts space. It's a place that can do traditional performing arts, but it can also do amplified programs and film and speakers and events and a wide range of community-oriented programs. So having done that, we then invited our partners at Brunner Cott, and Scott Aquilina is here tonight from their firm. I'm going to do his work for him just in the interest of time. We said, all right, well, where are we going to put this thing? We identified 6 sites and spent quite a lot of time looking at them in terms of some important criteria. Access to parking, visibility on Main Street, the proximity to retail, adequate footprint, and that the site potentially led to a project that is financially viable. I want to note that of those sites, it was the one on 201 Main Street. The timing of our work was just after that the Alex Shoes, they'd moved to a new location, and that property came on the market, so we were able to put it into our investigation. So as we went further with that, we boiled it down to 3 sites, the Spring Street, Court Street, and Main Street being the Alex Shoes option. And we looked more closely at those sites and how you could fit the recommended components onto those blocks. We ended up with a recommendation which was the preference for that Main Street site. The hard part of these studies is always the timing of a feasibility study in a community moving towards a project like this doesn't always line up with the way the real estate market works. So but it seemed to be an opportunity where we could be, or you as a community could be intelligently opportunistic, recognizing that there's a site available and if able to move in a fashion that matched the sort of timing of that real estate, that you might be able to acquire that site and advance that as the solution for this project. So we worked on how do the recommended components fit. There you have a 2-story project. We're recommending keeping retail on the ground floor, putting our main performance space up on a 2nd level with support areas. And here is a summary of the budget. Essentially, we're putting our 600 to 700 seat venue, which represents about 20,000 gross square feet of area, plus the 9,000 of retail and a little bit of support under it, gives us a 30,000 square foot building. Construction costs were estimated at $11.5 million. And notably here, the cost to adapt and reuse an existing structure is cheaper than the cost to build from scratch. Then we add to that soft costs, permits, fees, fixtures, furniture, and equipment of $2 million, plus the site acquisition of $2 million gets us to that project cost of $15.5 million. So while Scott was doing that work on the physical planning side, we wrote a preliminary business plan. We started with what do we want this building to do for our community? What goals do we set? We wanted to present high-quality arts and entertainment programming for people who live and visit the community. We wanted to support local businesses, government, and citizens with professional meeting and event spaces. We want affordable access for arts organizations here to find the spaces that they don't currently have, contribute to the economic vitality of Nashua, and do all of this in a way that is financially sustainable. We recommend that the City of Nashua be the owner and the operator of this facility. We looked at 5 different options and came back to this one. But in this case, we're recommending at least 2 outside partners. One is a foundation, a 501c3 that is established to raise money and represent the interests of the private sector, and that fundraising really being focused on raising an endowment in order to sustain the facility over the long term. And then another outside partner, a programmer, whether that's an operator of an existing performing arts facility or an entertainment programmer from the greater Boston region, who would help come and book and present acts in the venue. We developed a multi-year pro forma operating budget that suggests how these new facilities would generate revenue and incur expenses over time. And you have to spend some money before the facility opens, then you have a great opening year, which is the honeymoon, then you have a little bit of a hangover in the second year when things start to settle down, and really the third year is when things stabilize. So we ran it out for 5 years. We also made the assumption that if you're going to spend this money to build it, let's have an operating organization that can be going at 100 miles an hour, full bore from the day the building opens. So if you have the option, as some buildings take, of starting operations in a slower, more incremental fashion, but in this case, we've said let's have the complete organization doing all the programs that we think make sense right from day one. So here's a summary of that budget. The key is that really we're able to cover 3/4 of the operating budget with earned revenues, and that's because there's some rental business, there is a pretty healthy presenting business, and we have the meeting and event business in addition, with a strong food and beverage component that helps to drive earned income and minimize the amount of annual fundraising that's necessary to sustain these facilities. And you'll see that number is about 260,000, just staying fairly stable through that 5-year period. The other part of our work was to estimate the economic impacts of the project, and this we did with 2 sources. One is Americans for the Arts helps us estimate when people come to a performance, what they spend on food and babysitters and traveling and accommodations. And we also have multipliers that say when $1 is spent in a certain industry in Hillsborough County, we're able to suggest how that money is respent, and ultimately to suggest the total economic impact of those funds. So there are 3 elements of the economic impact. One is if you spent just on construction $12 million, that would drive $20 million in new economic activity, $6 million in new earnings, and 112 person years of employment. That's related to the construction project itself. On the operating side, there are 2 impacts. One is you've got this new operating organization that's out spending money every day on couriers and office supplies and lumber and whatever they're spending money on. So that represents another $500,000 in new sales every year. I'm sorry, $750,000 plus 170,000 in earnings, and that drives 4 additional jobs. Those are not jobs inside the center, but jobs created around the center because of that economic activity. But even more important than that is the economic activity associated with audiences, and this is where we use the Americans for the Arts numbers. The very conservative number of performances we've estimated suggest another 700,000 in new sales, 140,000 in new earnings, and another 5 jobs created as a result. So if you combine those 2 operating impacts, the building is driving $1.4 million annually in new economic activity, 300,000 in earnings, and 9 jobs. Now, recognize that these are very conservative economic impact numbers because we try not to count any economic activity that we're just pulling from another part of the county. So the economists would say that's a substitution effect. You can't count that. That's not real. However, because you're more interested in the impact on downtown Nashua, Scott has already begun to calculate and suggested to you that the economic activity that you're bringing to downtown Nashua is a much higher number that drives with new people coming to performances, eating out, shopping in downtown Nashua. In addition to the quantitative impacts are qualitative impacts. We believe this would be a catalytic project for the redevelopment of your downtown. We see it as a critical way for you to attract companies, workers, and residents to downtown Nashua, and we see it as a key attraction within a district that would drive cultural tourism. To move forward, there are 3 tracks. The first one is fundraising, and with tonight's activity, you head down that road on the public finance component. But then there's the private funding component, which is focused on sustainability. Then you'll begin the work of planning and design, of engaging in design teams and going through the stages of design. And while you're doing that, you're beginning to plan for operations with all the elements that you have to do around that. So really, the key steps are pursuing that public finance component, raising the operating endowment, going into planning and design phase with an architectural-led team, and preparing to operate these new facilities. And finally, I would summarize by saying that I believe that this is a strong concept for Performing Arts Center, given the demand that exists on the part of audiences and users for a wide range of programs and events. It's a great location on Main Street that can be a catalytic project for downtown Nashua. The cost to develop the center is reasonable, given the adaptive reuse opportunity that you have here. And finally, we believe that the skills and resources are in place or available that suggest a high probability of operating success. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Webb. Now we have, but I would like to emphasize just a couple things that Duncan said. Number one, the economic activity that he presented does not count any additional activity generated by people who currently live in Hillsborough County. So if someone came from Manchester or Hollis or Hudson or Amherst, none of those numbers are included, I believe, in Duncan's analysis. So next we have, and I'm going to ask him to come to the microphone, Peter Ramsey from the Palace Theater. Peter has been in the theater business for a long, long time, 30 years or so, and has been with the Palace, rescued it from bankruptcy 18 years ago, and has operated it ever since. And I think he can tell you about the economic benefits that the Palace has brought to Hanover Street in downtown Manchester. So
Thank
Peter,
you very much, Mayor.
you want to
Mr.
head over?
Ramsey, you can sit in my spot if you would like. sir.
Okay, why don't you come over to the,
This one here. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. My name is Peter Ramsey. I'm the president and CEO of the Historic Palace Theater in downtown Manchester, New Hampshire, on Hanover Street. I grew up in New Hampshire, New London, and have been running performing arts facilities for 30 years. I lived in Nashua, actually, 35 years ago, and loved it, and had a job at the old 88 down in the South End. And I met my wife. She dragged me to Manchester, and I've been married ever since and living with her. So I'll be very quick. What a wonderful project and concept you've embarked upon. You should be proud of yourself. You're giving the city's citizens hope in themselves, pride in their city, faith in their desire to live in Nashua. It takes a community to run a city. This process you are embarked upon will bring out both the positive people and the pessimists, the hopeful and the naysayers. But remember, your courage and foresight could change the city forever. Remember, the Palace Theater is 103 years old. It's been there for 100 years. Here's the truth about Manchester and the Historic Palace Theater and how we've impacted our city and the region. We are a not-for-profit historic theater. There is no owner of the theater. There is a volunteer board of directors. We are governed under state New Hampshire law by a board of directors of 22 trustees to protect it. They hired me 18 years ago when the Palace Theater was closed and it was dark. At the time I was hired, the theater had a debt of $240,000 to 45 different businesses downtown Manchester, to a printer, to 4 banks, et cetera, et cetera. We all worked hard, and before you know it, it was booked up and operating again. We are now incredibly successful. Here are some facts about the Palace. Our yearly budget is about $4 million, and now it's over $4 million, in fact. We earn ticket sales of over $3 million a year. We are as busy as you can imagine. So about 330 days a year, we're running events on the stage. over 300 shows, different shows. We had about 150,000 patrons last year. Let me repeat that. 150,000 people came downtown Manchester to see a show. We have 260 volunteer ushers. We have 15 full-time employees. At any given time, we average about 20 part-time. This week, we have 27 part-time employees beyond the 15 full-time. Summer theater, we dedicate to children. Last summer, we had over 27,000 kids come downtown. Southern New Hampshire University, Professor Doug Blaze has stated twice that we bring almost $8 to $10 million in economic activity to downtown Manchester. We have about 300 children from all over New Hampshire, including Nashua, come up to the Palace every week and take lessons, take makeup lessons, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We have 17 alumni working on Broadway this week, 17 alumni that have been at the Palace. We hired over 100 professional musicians last year, all from all over New England, and over 150 professional actors. We have 140 volunteer members of a board of advisors. We have 1,500 people who are members who pay us to be a member. That creates loyalty in the theater. We have partnerships with 175 different businesses, as you can see from the playbill. We have 25 different restaurants that we're partners with, 25. Think about the 3 blocks within 5 minutes of walking to the Palace on Hanover Street. On those, within 5 minutes of the Palace, there are 22 different restaurants, 200 apartments in 4 buildings, with rents from $700 a month to $1,500 a month. It's hard to find an apartment in downtown near the Palace. Last year, $11 million was spent on Hanover Street. Bill Binney from the Seacoast area invested almost $8 million. We have 3 law firms hiring over 170 attorneys within that distance. It's a tremendous asset to downtown and our overall community. The total effects of your efforts will be many. Some quiet, not so quiet. For example, economic. No question, I'm telling you, there will be economic. In my 18 years on Hanover Street, it's changed about 3 times, every time getting better. Educational, artistic. You have an artistic community of people who care about Nashua. Help them be more successful. Those people care about your city. They're great citizens. It'll be enchanting. There'll be nights you won't believe it. It's be enriching for your citizens, for your kids. Enriching. The heart changes when you sit there with your fellow citizens and cheer for a show at the end. It'll be charitable. Last year, the Palace Theater ran 13 fundraising events for no cost for local nonprofits. 13. We do it because it's the right thing to do. Your new theater will be a focal point for downtown. It's a great location. I applaud you. It's a great location. It will support the fellow artists living in the city, both artistic, sound technicians, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I predict you'll have 75,000 patrons in your first year. You will bring patrons from over an hour away. We do every night. Every night. Sunday afternoon, we had a nice crowd. I said hello to somebody, and the person said, "Oh, we're so proud to be here. We're from South Boston. We come up all the time." Part of the reason for that is because it's much cheaper to go in a theater in Boston. We do that on purpose. It will become a major success story of your next decade. It will help drive business downtown. It will give you all pride in what you're doing. It will give you pride in what you're doing. Communities are built by all of us, working together and being positive, dreaming big thoughts and caring about your fellow citizens. You can do that in Nashua. You've already done it. Pass this legislation. Work together. Go down in Nashua history together. Together, you can change your city. Create a legacy for Nashua that you all will be remembered for. Your names will be on the wall. Remember this day, January 22nd, 2018. It will go down in Nashua history as a day that you helped change the city forever. what you are doing is positively, in a wonderful, positive way, changing the future of your city forever. Thank you very much. I'm happy to answer any questions, or you can call me at the theater or come up and see me. Thank you very much.
Do you want a lot? You want questions, or what do you want to do?
Questions? Go ahead.
How much would it cost to steal you away from the Capitol? Peter sat in on when we did the economic impact of the culture, arts and culture in the state of New Hampshire. So valuable to the state. I don't know if you need a job with a little bit more pay, but I'll tell you, from what I know, the chances go up 10 points if he came, and definitely if he helped us find somebody close to what he is. He's a very important person to the state of New Hampshire.
Yeah, thank you, Representative. I mean, I am the luckiest guy in New Hampshire. I've got the best job. What we do matters every day. So thank you. Yeah, you can find people to run it. I mean, I would recommend hiring somebody from our region so they understand our mindset, the way we behave. I mean, people in New Hampshire are different, but it's a good thing. You have so much to be proud of here. So the other thing I forgot to tell you is that I've met Duncan before at the League of Historic Theaters and the American League of Historic Theaters. And 6 years ago, there are 2,000 members of these historic theaters across America. The Palace Theater was chosen the #1 historic theater in America 5 years ago. And it's because the city cares about it. So, congratulations. I think it's a great night for you.
Mayor, the next speaker. Oh,
Sure.
Alderman Jettie.
People ask me, one of the questions that I get asked a lot by the voters, the constituents of Nashua, is the question of, why is the city doing this? Why is the city putting up the 15 million? And if I'm not mistaken, the Palace, was started as a nonprofit. It wasn't the city of Manchester that put up the money to rebuild the Palace. So, you, Mr. Ramsey, or you, Mr. Webb, can you help explain to people why the city should be spending this money as opposed to a private nonprofit or a private investor?
Yes, sure. It's a good question. And again, if you remember what I just told you, there are going to be people who are going to be pessimists. You cannot live in government without it. And my answer is simple, because it will not make money. It's not a money-making proposition. Remember, I told you that. This is not something that a private individual would build because you cannot make money off it. And here's the reason you can't make money off it. Because it should be for the charitable good of all your citizens. It makes your city a better place to live. There are, nowadays in particular, with cell phones and all the gadgets we have, and with TV, we don't get together enough as citizens. It's undebatable. In Manchester, New Hampshire, in 1925, there were 22 theaters. There's only one left, and that's the Palace. And the city has helped us. Many, many times the city's helped us. Has never said no to us. And sometimes it's $25,000 to buy sound equipment. Other times it's other things. We get examined every time we do it, which is the way it should work. You should ask a lot of questions. I'm happy to have any one of you come up to the Palace. I'll spend an hour or two with you. We'll walk around. We'll talk about it. We'll walk along Hanover Street. But there's no question that a private individual would not build a professional theater in New Hampshire. You could not make money at it. The Palace Theater, 2 years ago, we almost broke even. First year in 18 years. I don't expect to break even this year. We raised an average of $400,000 a year. I'm very good at raising money. I love to do it, and we're very good at it. But it's hard to raise money. And so what we do is have an endowment. When I started, we had no endowment. We now have about $4.5 million, and it helps. We don't touch it unless we need it, but we helped. So does that make sense to you? And I only know one private theater in northern New England. The other thing I should tell you, I was just in New York City on Saturday night. I went down for 3 days to a conference. I went to see Waitress. Great show. If you're down, go see it. But I paid $172 for a ticket. I've never had a $172 ticket at the Palace Theater, and we've had some big stars. So,
Let me just add a couple of comments. So there are some projects, there's no one way to fund a project like this. And in some communities, the public sector provides the capital, the private sector provides the operating support. In another community, 20 miles down the road, it's the opposite. And then there are other communities where it's a hybrid. I think in this situation, the funding formula is the right one. You have capacity to provide capital funding. There is a sense in the community that there is operating support. And frankly, it is that ongoing sustainability which is the bigger challenge than the upfront capital. So I think it is a reasonable proposition that if you can find a way to provide that upfront capital to do the renovation and then seek the private sector support in building a sufficient endowment to sustain operations, it's a win-win. You have strong private sector support, you're able to use the tools and resources you have, and the community gets a theater.
All set?
Finally, Mr. Chair, thank you very much, Peter. That was really nice of you to come down. We have, Tim Cummings and I and Alderman McCarthy have gone up to the Palace to visit, and the operation there is truly impressive, and Peter's done a great job. Now, is Alan Chong here? I thought yes, Alan. So could you come forward and sit where Peter was?
Actually, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, okay, maybe the microphone then? Alan Chong is the director of the Courier, and the Courier has very graciously agreed that if we establish a performing arts center, an interior in the space, no storefront, establish an 800 square foot museum or showing space, gallery space, will program the space, engaging Nashua artists to do Nashua-related work and some other projects. I think Alan knows more of the details of what he would like to do, but I think that adds greatly to the prestige and the effectiveness of our undertaking, and therefore I asked Mr. Chong to come down, and he graciously agreed to do so.
Well, we couldn't be more excited. Can you all hear me? We couldn't be more excited by the prospect of developing an arts center. So I'm very pleased to be back here to talk about it. I won't go through the presentation I did last time, but it's extremely important not only for the economic development of Nashua, but also for the region. It's also important for the quality of life generally for the state of New Hampshire that you undertake this project. I think it lifts, a lot of people. Now, we're late entrant into this whole thing. We're interested in the visual arts. That's our primary focus at the Courier Museum of Art. But we thought that if there was room and willingness to have us be a partner in this, we could make a lively contribution to the whole art center. We don't need a storefront. We don't need what I would call prime real estate. In fact, it's helpful to have a dark box in the back that can be secure, that can be artificially lit. But we're very interested in connecting the arts, that is, connecting the performance art with the visual arts. And in fact, there are many organizations, like the one that you're considering, that have a visual arts component, either in the form of a pop-up gallery, perhaps even a commercial gallery. But increasingly, the role of public museums becomes very much to the fore in these places. And for us, we would be able to program something interesting that may, for example, relate to Nashua, relate to its region, but perhaps also relate to performances. And many of the advantages that have been talked about so far really accrue also to a small gallery. The increase in school visitations, in public engagement, the fact that there is a visual arts component while one is shopping, while one is visiting, partaking in a performance, a gallery that be open before and after a performance and during intermission is a very lively situation, and some of us have seen many of these kinds of mixed-use organizations. We're interested in crossover. Now, the other thing I guess I need to emphasize for you is that we are a state museum. We serve all of the people of New Hampshire. We are not specific to Manchester in any way. We are already actively engaged in the city of Nashua. We serve and make available school visits to every fourth grader in Nashua, in Manchester, and in Concord. And we'd like to expand that to other areas and actually to increase the number of those visits so that school children can come more than once to the Currier Museum. Having a facility in Nashua is very important for that. We can conduct community programs, school programs in this wonderful venue that you're considering. So from our point of view, we see this as a wonderful way of expanding our remit to serve the citizens of New Hampshire. We couldn't be more excited. I have to emphasize again that you're considering this again after just a few months and after a recent election that I guess you're all very much aware of. But it's something that would be very, very beneficial for everyone. And I think the role of arts, whether it's the performing arts or the visual arts, helps not only economically, I mean, that's all very important, but it helps us think. It helps the quality of life. It's educational. It's entertaining. And it's really, for us in the museum world, it really enhances what we do in many, many different ways. And if you're willing to entertain a partnership with the Currier Museum, we're a recipient of an endowment that we can apply to this venture. We will need more support. Need more resources. I don't want to promise that we can do it all alone, but I think we've already made a good start, and we're very, very happy, and we will be very pleased to participate in your venture.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Questions or?
Are there any, Mr. Cummings, Director Cummings?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to take a moment and address some comments I've gotten over the last couple weeks, or some issues that have been raised over the last couple days. Some issues and comments you've heard already, but it's worth noting. First is the parking. And to be very clear about the parking, it was one of the critical issues we took into consideration when we were looking at siting the Performing Arts Center in the downtown. We have something in the order of magnitude of 2,500 spaces. The site itself is less than 200 feet from the Elm Street parking garage. I want folks to think about how close the garage is compared to 201 Main Street, and then think about when you go to a shopping mall and you park. Oftentimes at one of the anchor stores, you are walking much further than 200 feet from where your car may be to the entrance of something like the Pheasant Lane Mall. So parking was addressed and thought of in great detail. Again, another issue that has been brought up is relative to the feasibility plan. Is this building going to be code compliant? So for the Performing Arts Center to receive an occupancy permit, it will need to conform to all the standard codes, building codes that are presently regulating the city here today, meaning it will have to be fire compliant. And we will work with the fire marshal's office to ensure that it is designed appropriately, as well as the building inspector here in the city to make sure that all the mechanicals and other building code issues are addressed. Before we got to the conclusion of the feasibility study, Scott Aquilina is here from Brunner Cott. He's our architect. He went through the building in detail. He did an inspection. I've spoken to Scott about this on a couple of occasions. He feels, and I do as well, very confident that there's value in the building. You'll be able to build off the basis of what's currently there. So it's a good foundation, and we'll be able to use what's there to our benefit. For instance, the mechanicals that are there now serviced retail and are in good working order. With some improvements, we'll be able to then use the existing system with some enhancements for the Performing Arts Center. Scott made a passing comment to me just recently that we should be very pleased with the building because it's in good working order, and the current owner of the facility has clearly taken care of it over the years. So this is not similar to the Burke Street property. I want to be clear about that. The Burke Street was a differing type of project where it went to auction. It was owned by a corporate company that let that asset fall by the wayside. This has been a building that has been near and dear to a family-owned business here in the city, and we will be able to use it to as much as possible. Relative to the tax issue, yes, if this building is purchased by the city, we would be potentially losing the tax revenue off of the entire building, which is approximately $50,000 right now. But I will note, we have creatively designed the building in, again, this conceptual plan to try to activate the first floor, which has approximately 6-ish thousand square feet of retail. If we were to rent that out to the private sector, we would be looking to generate rent off of that, plus the taxes. It's a state law here in New Hampshire where we would have to pass on a pro rata share of the tax dollars. So we would be getting some tax benefit as well as potential rental income. Why are we going down this path when we have the Court Street Theater? And the answer very simply is this is a differing product. This is not the same thing as the Court Street Theater. Court Street Theater is for community theater. We would be looking to do something at a much larger scale, trying to bring in outside entertainment to the downtown. Mr. Chairman, just quickly wanting to go over a couple other points that were raised recently, though I think I've hit on most of them. If we were to purchase the building, would we be able to use it in the meantime until that endowment is raised? I think the answer to that could be yes, so long as the insurance is provided for and that we have a plan in place and it's managed well. There's been no discussions of how it could be used in the meantime, but it would be available to us if we wanted to make that a functioning space as we go through the design phase, as well as raising that endowment fund. Transportation, public transportation, lastly, this site is readily accessible by public transportation, and we'll make sure that that is noted and publicized so people can use public transportation to get to the building. I want to note that we have our treasurer here, Dave Fredette. He can probably speak to this better than I can, but it's been made abundantly clear to me over the last couple of years that this program, this project, will be built into our capital plan, and therefore taxes would not go up because of this specific project. It would be accommodated in our current capital budget. Relative to running the Performing Arts Center, we have this body in the last session put together a steering committee. And the steering committee, when it meets, will be charged with developing a strategic plan and an operational business plan for the theater, which will be predicated a lot on the feasibility study that was done. And we would be looking to have that conversation so I can more specifically address how it will be operated. But as Duncan Webb pointed out to us a few moments ago, we would be looking to have a third-party nonprofit and a professional manager actually running the facility. I believe I've addressed most of the questions that have been brought to our attention over the last couple of days or weeks, and the presentation, I believe, did as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Director Cummings. Okay, if there are no additional questions from any of the members of the Board of Aldermen, Alderman Lizzie Golia?
For the record, if you could just note, although I didn't come into the Horseshoe, I joined you in the chamber at 7:30, and I was at the Capital Improvements Committee meeting. I was not out sliding on the ice.
We did take that note.
Thank you.
Alderman Jettie?
I appreciate the answers to the questions, and there's one other question that people have asked me, and since Mr. Webb is here, I would like to take advantage of his presence, and that is I think you said that we would be spending 11 or 12 million dollars on constructing or reconstructing or rehabbing the building. Some people have questioned that amount. Can you reassure us that that's a reasonable number?
Mr. Webb?
Sure. Well, it's not my business. I'm not a physical planner and architect, but Scott, who's from Brunner Cott, who was responsible for collecting and organizing those cost estimates, has said to me that he believes that those numbers are prudent and conservative, meaning that the most important thing is that the number doesn't turn out to be so much more. I think that's a greater danger. I think if you get into the next round of work where you really get inside the building and have more engineering studies done, you will be able to refine that budget and bring it down potentially. But I think at this point in the process, we wanted a number that was conservative in that it's at the upper limit of what you might spend. So I'm confident that it's a good conservative number and that you're more likely to end up with a lower cost than you are to end up with a higher cost.
Alderman McCarthy?
Reiterate that in addition to the estimates that were provided from their architect, we had those independently verified by Carl Dubois of Harvey Construction, and that came in at approximately the same numbers. And Harvey has given us conservative but very accurate numbers for the last 6 school projects that we did when they have done estimations. So I'm very confident in the accuracy of those estimate numbers.
I'd like to add that under the Joint Special School Building Committee, which was approved through the Board of Aldermen, we've built 2 high schools and renovated a number of elementary schools, and they have all been under budget, and we passed the money on to the next project, and then at the end, we had money. So we have a history of using conservative numbers and not being involved in overruns. Anyone else? Okay, I'm going to open the public hearing. And the first testimony I'm going to call for is testimony in favor of R18001. When you come up to the microphone, please clearly, for the record, state your name and address, and try to be succinct in your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening. My name is Jim Laspazio. I'm the co-owner of Stella Blue Restaurant at 70 East Pearl Street in downtown Nashua. And we at Stella Blue enthusiastically support the Nashua Performing Arts Initiative. In the terms of Mr. Webb, this project has bumped along for over 16 years now. And after the election in November, when the popular vote approved this project, we hope this committee will move forward as expeditiously as possible. And to relate to some earlier economic discussion, when the Performing Arts Center were to open, we initially would undoubtedly hire at least 1 full-time and 2 to 3 part-time people, assuming they're going to have 100 events or more throughout the year. We would possibly even open 7 days a week, and we would consider opening for lunch, which would even add more people to that staffing increase. So we're looking at initially 20 to 25% increasing in staff as soon as the Performing Arts Center opens. So the economic lift it will bring to our restaurant and other Nashua, downtown Nashua businesses is clear. We eagerly anticipate a blossoming art culture that will benefit people of all ages in the city for decades. Art will do what it always does. It brings people together from different walks of life. It fires people's imagination with impossibilities. It enhances the quality of life for everyone. An undertaking of this size is challenging for sure, but an opportunity like it may never come along again. We salute those who have the courage and vision to make great things happen, and we add our voice to yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Anyone else that wants to testify in favor of R 18001?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Welcome to those of you who are new board members since the last time I spoke on this. I'm Tracy Hatch, President and CEO of the Greater Nashua Chamber of Commerce, and I reside at 37 Chester Street in Nashua. I want to add my voice of support for this. This is an issue the Chamber spent a great deal of time over the last several years looking at. We're always interested in initiatives within the city, investments in infrastructure in the city that will result in enhanced economic development for our business members and all of those of us who live in Nashua and the Greater Nashua region, and we believe this project does that. We spent a lot of time in the fall leading up to the question that was put on the ballot talking about the numbers. And while it's difficult to say if we do this, we can put an actual dollar figure on exactly how many dollars will come in the first year, second year, third year. If you look to the other communities within the state of New Hampshire that have invested heavily and support the arts with performing arts theaters like Portsmouth, like Concord, like the Monadnock region and Rochester, and you look at the numbers that came out of the I believe it's the American Council on the Arts study that came out last summer, you can see that economic driver that the performing arts have been within those communities. Portsmouth alone, over $58 million annually that comes into Portsmouth directly and indirectly through the performing arts that happen in that community. That's not just ticket sales, that's not just the salaries of performers or the people who are eating out in restaurants. That's things like the hotels that put up the performers. That's someone going out to dinner, and I'm not in this category anymore, but with young kids who's hiring a babysitter. If I come in with a young child, it's definitely not mine. But those kinds of things that have a ripple effect throughout the community and affect not just downtown business owners, but really everyone within our community. We think this is an important and significant investment in infrastructure for our community, and we are wholeheartedly in support of the Performing Arts Center and encourage you all to vote in favor of this bond issue. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else that would like to testify in favor of R 18001?
I'm Mary Lou Blaisdell. I reside at 32 Webster Street in Nashua, and I also own a business at 206 Main Street. I'd like to start, I received James Tobin from Brady Sullivan was going to be here this evening but couldn't, and he asked me to read these comments from Brady Sullivan to all of you tonight. To the City of Nashua Board of Aldermen Budget Committee. As many of you know, Brady Sullivan Properties is currently rehabilitating the Franklin Street Mill Building and converting it into a residential community, as we have done with several historic mill buildings throughout New England. What is perhaps less known is our recent acquisition of over 250,000 square feet of commercial office property in the Gate City. These developments are clear testament to our confidence in and our commitment to the community in which the constituents here tonight work, live, play, and shop. Over the years, our company has focused on long-term commitment to New England communities, most notably in New Hampshire, and as mentioned, most recently right here in Nashua. The decision to seize an opportunity to acquire a sizable share of both commercial and residential market in the city came from the belief in the people of Nashua and the sense of community. Today, we firmly believe that the addition of the Performance Arts Center in Nashua's historic downtown would be another major step toward neighborhood revitalization and the ever-important civic attraction to the areas between exits 1 and 7 and 8. Nashua undoubtedly has the infrastructure to support a performing arts center. Companies on a local level continue to grow, while Massachusetts-based businesses have begun to look more seriously at the benefits of operating in a tax-free New Hampshire. Even those who work for Mass-based cities north of Boston are settling residentially on this side of the border, between Clock Tower Place, the Cotton Mill, and our new development on Franklin Street, which will be welcoming to downtown. The number of business people, shoppers, and diners is increasing every year. The ripple effect of strategically implementing this type of civic attraction is undeniable and would be universally beneficial to what is truly a great American downtown. As committed members of the passionate Nashua community, it is our sincere hope that the board is able to recognize this unique opportunity presented here tonight, and that without question it is a paramount decision in the history of the Gate City and for the future of the Gate City. Sincerely, Shane Brady and Arthur Sullivan. And I would just, there are so many positive things that have been said tonight about the Performing Arts Center. I won't go over them once again. I'm 100% behind it. I think it's something our downtown, our city, our community needs, and I hope that you all do support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to testify in favor of ours 18001?
Good evening, Michael Joseph, 184 Main Street. There's an issue that hasn't been addressed, and I'm really big on the issue. I think it's important. Why was Nashua recently rated the safest city in America in 2017 by Wallet Hub? There are other things that go into that, just that go beyond public safety, that go beyond fire protection, police protection, and what the community does. We also have the ranking of, as you know, Money Magazine, number 16, which is also a feather in our cap as a community. And again, it comes back to that community aspect. So it goes way beyond safety. I will guarantee you that there are hidden reasons for those positive ratings. And they have to do with arts and the quality of life that a community provides its citizens. And that raises the overall well-being and the sense of health and well-being and mental health even of the people who live here. And, you know, Nashua does that rather well. Several times a year, we close off our main street to traffic and we have a party. Okay? Those are all great events, and you can't tell an old music teacher, an old sage music teacher, all music teachers are sages, that doesn't make a difference, because it does. When you see hundreds and hundreds of people out having a good time in their city, in their community, and people from surrounding areas, you can't tell me, you're never going to convince me that that doesn't make a difference in how we act and how we are as a community, health-wise, overall. I'm sure that Mr. Ramsey would agree that there's a certain aura, a magic about Hanover Street in Manchester, between the block between Chestnut Street and Elm Street, that draws people, that's exciting, that's captivating, and you want to be there. And I will bet that a lot of residents who may not even get there all that often are still glad it's there, and that has an effect. So it goes beyond the city just funding something that's a concern of dollars and cents. It goes way beyond that. I'd like to close with a quote. Some of you, I realize that some members of this board are not old enough to remember Petula Clark. But Petula Clark in the 1960s sang a very famous song, and the only reason I'm going to quote this because I believe it's Nashua. When you're alone and life is making you lonely, you can always go downtown. The lights are much brighter there. You can forget all your troubles, forget all your cares. So go downtown. That's Nashua. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else that would like to testify in favor of our 18001?
David Grabowski, 42 Wood Street, and my wife and I also own a small business on Main Street in Nashua. Three brief points that I'd like to make. First, I'm very pleased that Mr. Ramsey made this earlier, and that is that there's been a lot of debate about the economic numbers that have been that have come out of the study prior to this, whether they be construction numbers or economic impact. I don't know that that's necessarily the appropriate barometer for a project like this. The cultural impact that this project potentially could lend to our community is so much more important. The city funds parks, the city funds a library, the city funds our new sidewalks, the city's considering a new riverfront development project, all things that are important to the quality of life here in Nashua, and I doubt that any of them are self-sustaining. The fact that this initiative has the potentially even break even, I think, places it so much more above any of those other assets to the city, and I think that should make it a no-brainer. If it were a great moneymaker, somebody would have snatched that building up and would be doing it already as a private entity. It's only the city that can do something like this. Secondly, I think it's important to recognize that as much as we all love Nashua, this is not a city with a lot of natural advantages, particularly relative to some of our neighboring cities. We don't have sandy beaches. We don't have a bustling seaport. We don't have mountains and ski slopes. We've got an underdeveloped riverfront, a very small baseball team, and basically we're just a mid-sized mill building that's trying to rebuild itself and trying to recreate itself in order to compete with everything else that goes on around us. Anything that's going to take place that's positive in this community, we're going to have to do it. It just doesn't naturally occur here. We don't have even a bustling college environment, vibrant college community. With all due respects to Revere, they're not really directly connected to our downtown. There's not a lot of activity that comes out of that. So really, it's incumbent upon us and incumbent upon all of you to help create opportunities to revitalize our community. And lastly, the worst thing that could come out of this, from my point of view, would be for us to appropriate funds to this and then start to look for ways to cut corners. If we're going to commit money to this, it needs to be an outstanding attraction for downtown Nashua. The acoustics have to be excellent. It needs to be, have character and charm. It needs to be, a place that's accessible, and it needs to be really a true attraction for our community. Too often I see that, we try and do things on the cheap, and then, all you're doing is creating a white elephant, and all the naysayers, will be able to come back and say, see, I told you so. And I think that's a lot like our Court Street facility. It was done just trying to take advantage of a dilapidated building with minimal investment. If we're going to do it, please do it right. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else that would like to speak in favor of our 18001?
Of course, I got to bring this down. Everybody's kind of used to that. My name is Joy Barrett. I live at 5 Elliott Street here in Nashua. I've lived there for 22 years. And I was excited walking in tonight, and then I got even more excited as I heard the presentations that were before us. And I'd like to remind everybody that back in the late 1990s, this city applied to be a Main Street community. Several of us were involved in that initiative. We were invited up to Concord for a very big and special night where they were going to award 3 of the 5 cities the honor of being a Main Street community. And of course, at that time, Nashua did not get that designation. And we all left in our cars completely devastated and very disappointed. But what happened on the car ride home was that we all said to ourselves, we're really not a Main Street, we're a great American downtown. And so I would encourage you really to continue to make investments in our city and our downtown. The stars really are aligning. I'm very proud to live here. I'm very proud to have heard the conversations that took place tonight. And I am in full support of this Performing Arts Center, and I'm very excited to be seated there to see a performance. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else that would like to speak in favor of our 18001?
Good evening, Lou Juris here, 56 Haynes Street. This does sound like it's going to be a linchpin to help and to keep downtown rolling. And in addition to that, the rest of the neighborhoods that maybe aren't as connected to downtown, say off of Exit 1, off of Amherst Street, way off of Broad Street, you know, going further north towards the Merrimack line. And I think that that's going to draw some more of the residents in who maybe don't try to come down to this area, down to the city as much as you would have in the past, where you had some of these areas off of Hollis Street and off of South Main Street, and of course the old neighborhoods here where you could almost walk or bike into downtown. So it's important to be wide-eyed. It will present some risks, but at the same time, the upside is definitely there for this, and we should go forward with it. Thank you.
Anyone else that would like to speak in favor of R 18001?
Yes, hello. My name is Jody Gage, and like my parents, I am a lifelong resident of Nashua. Additionally, I am the owner of Fortune Gage Flower and Gift Shop, located at 86 West Pearl Street in the heart of downtown Nashua since 1931. I've seen a great number of changes in Nashua over the years. The loss of numerous businesses that, in their heyday, were considered the cornerstones of the downtown. This attrition has left us with a downtown that I believe is teetering on the edge. As a resident and lifelong supporter of the downtown, its businesses, and the arts, I am strongly in favor of the Performing Arts Center in the former Alex Shue building. I think that it will be a great location, and if run correctly, and I do differ with Peter Ramsey, although he is the expert, could actually be a moneymaker. The Tupelo Music Facility has a strong following, and I think this is the model that we should be following. I just spent $500 on 4 tickets, so I know he says everything under 100. But if you have the right acts, people will pay whatever it is to get there. It's much cheaper to pay $125 for a ticket and go out to Derry at Tupelo than it is to have to go to Boston and pay $50 or $60 to park. Imagine hosting those same acts here in the downtown instead of, no offense meant, Derry. You could go out to eat at great restaurants down here. Stella Blue. The added versatility of the Performing Arts Center as proposed, along with the support of the Courier Gallery, would make this venue the envy of New England. I've been to a number of small, similarly sized facilities throughout the area, and I don't believe any of them are as nice or as adaptable, which I think is a key, as this facility has been proposed. Additionally, as a longtime business owner in the downtown, I believe that this is one of those opportunities that don't come around often. Is it perfect? No. Have we tried a performing arts center before, only to have it fail and fall into disrepair? Yes. But do we stop when we fall, or do we get back up, dust ourselves off, and try again? I say we try again. Nashua has a golden opportunity to take a monumental step forward. I've heard some say we can't afford it. I say we can't afford to let this opportunity slip through our hands. I am 100% in favor of the Performing Arts Center as proposed. Move Nashua forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else that would like to speak in favor of R 18001?
All right. Good evening, everybody of the chamber. I'm Mary Bell. I'm a resident of Nashua for over 10 years. I used to be a student of theater. I'm in favor, actually, of the Performance Center as well. And I would like to say, in addition, that Nashua has a lot of talent that can be discovered and can be actually pursued once actually the center is open. Once actually all the functions are completely fully running, there's a lot of talent that we can use and represent and put back Nashua back in the map. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else that would like to speak in favor of R 18001?
Good evening. Elaine Olenson. I live on Raymond Street, and I've lived in Nashua for 35 years. And I'm part of the Nashua International Sculpture Symposium, and I am very much in support of the Performing Arts Center. I'm so impressed with everything that's has been said today. Most of what has been said is what I feel in my heart, and this is just an amazing opportunity. Nashua recently received the Governor's Award for Creativity. The timing is right. The timing is perfect. The stars have just aligned. This is the time. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. It's very important, and I am 100% in support of the Performing Arts Center. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak in favor of our 18001?
Hi, I'm Don Smithweiss from 38 Cushing Ave. We already have thousands of people in the city who do come to plays. I want to point out some reasons that this would provide a great venue that we don't have now. I've worked in professional and community theater for many years. I was at the Palace as the technical director about 25 years ago. I will point out that I left several years before they went out of business, so that wasn't my fault. But when we had a professional touring company come in, they would generally show up at about 6 a.m. Now, Keefe Auditorium is a school, or part of a school, until 3 p.m. We even have a problem with actor singers when we try to get sets done, because we can't get in there till 3, and then we have to leave at 10 or 11 at night. So the limitations on time prevent a huge number of possible performances coming into the city. We also, a theater isn't just evening shows. When I worked at the Palace, we would have cooking demonstrations. We would have Shakespeare shows or other plays that high school and middle school kids would come to at 10 a.m. in the morning. So there are a lot of venues there are a lot of things that happen in a theater. It's not just Friday, Saturday, and Sunday night that it's going to be used. One other thing, and I'm not being facetious, you can't drink at Keefe or Court Street. When people come to a show, they like to have a drink at intermission, and that's a perfectly reasonable thing to do. That's what adults do when they go to the theater. This would be one of the advantages of that, which also generates a bunch of income that goes back into the operation of the theater. I'm 100% behind this. I can tell you that I am speaking for several hundred of my friends who feel the same. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else that would like to testify in favor of R 18001?
Hello, my name is Michael Watt, 5 Strawberry Bank Road, Nashua, New Hampshire. For the Performing Arts Center, recently I just chaired the Nashua Enrichment Committee. A lot of us came together after they failed to get the 10 votes they needed to, and it went on the ballot. And I just remember being there with multiple members of the community out on the cold November day holding signs. I just want to reiterate one piece of information. Was actually omitted, was that New Hampshire Business Review in June of last year stated that the arts generate $120 million into the economy actively annually, which translates to 3,851 full-time jobs, $81 in household income, and $12.4 million in local and state revenue. If you talk to members in Concord, Manchester, and Derry about how they feel about their performing arts centers, I haven't found one yet that said, oh, I hate that, it's terrible, it doesn't bring money into the community. But this center will definitely benefit us from the National Touring Acts to the comedy shows, the film screenings, the art exhibitions. This center will be truly a multi-use facility. It could also be used for business conferences, wedding receptions, parties. And from my understanding and from everything I'm hearing today, the Courier is definitely interested, and there's also multiple businesses that are interested in the first floor. I am completely in favor of it being a public partner, private partnership, because I feel like it's a way for the outside business community to get involved. At this point, as you know, the vote was a favorable vote back in November. What that said to me, as well as talking to the people in the community and the 412 likes that we have on our Nashua Enrichment page, that people started talking and they started saying, is this something that we need? It's a very large price tag. And I think that when we started talking to each other, seeing what the economic gain was from the other communities, we said it was completely worth it. I'm going to end with a quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson: "Fear defeats more people than anything else in the world." So let's remember ourselves when we make the vote today. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Anyone else that would like to speak in favor of our 18001?
Hi, my name's Jamie Turbine. I'm from 35 Chester Street, and I will be brief. The one point that I would like to bring up is that there is a cost of doing nothing for this. There's a cost to kicking the can down the road. As other commenters here have stated, the stars are aligned for this. It's a great location. It's great parking. It's the city is in wonderful financial shape to pay for this bond. It will not increase taxes. The money is readily available, or it can be with the bond issue. Not doing those things means we lose out on all the residual impact to other businesses downtown. We maintain the status quo while other communities around us continue to build up and invest in things that will bring in individuals and businesses to their communities. We have an opportunity to be in the mix, to step up our game, to attract local people, or to attract people to our locality, businesses to Nashua, bring money in from people who want to see shows, who want to go to restaurants downtown, who want to go to the businesses downtown. We've heard from a lot of the downtown business owners tonight. At the previous public hearing, we heard from even more of the local business owners. The economic impact is measurable, it's feasible, it's real. And to miss out on that is just, it's sort of, slapping downtown in the face almost. It's sort of, turning your back on it to some degree. And I guess that's my point. I said I would be brief, and I didn't really be brief, but thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else that would like to speak in favor of R 18001? Seeing no one else, I will now call for testimony in opposition to R 18001.
My name's Fred Feeboom. I reside at 24 Cheyenne Drive. And seeing that 12 aldermen signed up as sponsors, and all the people here in favor, I kind of feel a little bit in the minority. Pardon me if I'm a bit skeptical, but 25 years ago, I stood in this very chamber. I think I've just elected, or just about to be elected alderman. Alderman McCarthy just got elected. And at that time, Tracy Hatch was an alderman. And in great excitement, we're going to buy this building from Stabile. We're going to pay $650,000, and guess what? It's going to be wonderful. We have a theater, community theater, all kinds of stuff. And 3 years later, 4 years later, the whole thing collapsed. Pardon me if I'm a bit skeptical. You took a citywide vote, and with all this hullabaloo by the great American downtown, going door to door, campaigning everywhere, it passed by 1.5% of the vote. 1.5%. 5 of the 9 wards voted no. When I look at this, only 1, Ward 5, Ward 6, Ward 7, and Ward 9. So at least expect those aldermen to vote no. including Mr. Gage. Now, this being a public hearing, I'd like to have a couple of minor questions, okay? My first question is to is the architect here? I think the architect is here. Am I right? No?
He's not up, he's here, but he's not up here.
Is the architect in the room? Okay. The architect, I happened to study this in some detail because my involvement in Court Street when it first came up. I looked at the architectural data. In 11 January, you published a report. And in 4 January, your equipment people published a report. And altogether, they came to about $21 million. If it isn't, then maybe you can correct me, but I saw the 11 January and the 4 January reports, $21 million. And what happened, the wages got to $15.5 million because in June or I think it's July, Economic Development Director, sitting over there, Mr. Cummings, wrote a memorandum saying, I know it's kind of high, but I can come up with $5.4 million in funding opportunities. That's his terminology. Didn't identify what a funding opportunity would be, but that brought it down to $15.5 million. Now, I've looked at lots of architectural stuff in my time, but I have about zero confidence in this number. I have more confidence in the 21.5 million because it's a very detailed analysis of this facility. Now, in that same report, there are 3 more options, as was briefed today. And Mr. Webb did not tell you what the cost of those other options were. The option in Spring Street, I think, never existed. It's a building that doesn't even exist. But Court Street exists, and there were 2 options. And one option was $2.5 million below the $21 million. And the other option was $7.5 million below the $21 million. And what it said is, do the thing in Court Street, renovate a beautiful building that's fallen in disrepair. One of the theaters the large theater is no longer in use. The street theater is in use. Why not renovate that at a lower cost with lots of parking, large theater? And what happened? If you look at the presentation of the minutes, you can kind of see within the minutes that there was diversion from Court Street. And somebody said, when it was brought up by one of the aldermen, I don't know if they're still sitting here or not, said, no, we're really not interested in Court Street, we're interested in Main Street. What you have here, ladies and gentlemen, is a classic case of steering the study into this Alex Shoe store. Now, this Alex Shoe store facility is a 7,100 square foot facility. I have a question to the gentleman from the Palace Theater. Is he still here? He's gone. I was going to ask, how big is that? How big is that theater? Do anybody know? Is anywhere near 7,000? Yes.
It's 830, 830 seats.
8 what?
830 seats.
Okay,
The Palace is
that's
830.
comparable with this.
It's a little bit bigger.
No, this one is 1,000 standing. I think it's 550 seated and 500 in tiered seating. You got a variable configuration. But he mentioned $4 million. You have projected $1 million a year. And the $1 million a year shows a $250,000 deficit. And you briefed that. And how do you make up $250,000 deficit? Well, they said we're going to get this $4 million endowment fund, and that's going to pay us a certain amount of interest. I think it's $150,000 a year. And we're going to get another $100,000 a year for more contributions. That's on top of the $4 million you're trying to get before you even start construction. Where are you going to get the $4 million? Is anybody, and that's not a question, Mr. Mayor, anyone, Has anyone identified a source for the 4 million that is contingent on doing construction at Alex Shoe Store? Anybody has an answer? No answer. $4 million has to be raised before you can construct. Now, you can spend $2 million buying this building and take $50,000 off the tax roll. You can start doing preliminary design. If the $4 million is not raised, you could probably resell the building, if you can. Well, you probably can. And whatever sunken cost went into design and security and maintenance is lost. So why don't you get the $4 million first and then come up with this bond issue? I think you got the cart before the horse, as they say. A point about the economic impact. It is not $50 million, as Tracy has said, or 60 million, whatever crazy numbers I heard. The number was briefed to you by Mr. Webb. It's $1.4 million a year. The cost of the bond is $1.1 million a year. Why don't you just give them the cash? If they needed that badly, give them the cash. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak in opposition to R 18001? Seeing no one, is there any additional comments in favor of R 18001? Alderman Marianne Lizzie-Golia?
Yes, Alderman Dowd. We received an email from someone in Ward 1 who asked that it be read into the record in favor. Would this
Okay.
be appropriate?
Sure, I didn't see it, but
And it's, all of us have been copied, so you will be able to copy it
Okay.
to be included in the record. Greeting board members, my name is Chris Grant and I reside in Ward 1. My address is 110 Coliseum Avenue, number 305. Due to the icy weather, I'm unable to attend tonight's meeting regarding the Performing Arts Center public hearing. However, I'm emailing to make sure my voice is still heard on this issue. Back in November, a ballot question was placed before the voters on whether or not to support the city issuing a bond to acquire the former Alex Shoe Store building and convert it to a PAC. I voted yes. Fast forward to tonight's meeting, and my view has not changed. Nashua needs this. Downtown needs this. I see this as a major growth opportunity and a total game changer for Main Street. Sometimes I think we're too used to and too comfortable living in the shadow of Manchester and Lowell, two cities that have amazing venues of their own. What about us? Please vote yes. It's time to invest in Nashua, its downtown, and its future. Thank you. Chris Grant, 110 Coliseum Avenue.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Alderman Lizzie-Golia. Anyone else who would like to speak in favor? Yes, Alderman Gerhardt.
I have a
Catherine.
letter as well from Stephen Goldstein, and he's at 9 Temple Drive, Ward 8. I was intending to come to the public hearing on 122 to show my support for such a facility. Unfortunately, as I was leaving my house, I started to slide down my driveway due to freezing rain and decided not to chance my having a car accident. I do appreciate that the hearing is being streamed on the web, and I am following it with great interest.
Thank you very much. Anyone else like to speak in favor of R 18001? Seeing no one. Any other opposition? Anyone who wants to testify in opposition to R 18001?
It gives me an opportunity to Fred P. Boom. Just 2 shots at it. The Palace Theater, Mr. Mayor, since you know its operation, does it make money or lose money?
Well, as you pointed out, the budget is $4 million a year. Now, the reason that it's as high as that is because they produce 8 shows a year. So they are producing 8 musicals, and they bring in actors from New York. They hire stage people. They do the whole thing, and therefore, and they do a lot of other things. So the budget is $8 million a year, or excuse me, $4 million a year. Now they bring in $3.6 million, but as Mr. Ramsey mentioned, they keep their ticket prices low. The top price is $50. And I said, well, could you get more than that? In one of my visits up there, I said, could you get more than $50 if you wanted to? And the board there wants to keep the prices low so that everybody can buy the tickets. And Mr. Ramsey's answer was, yes, we could get a lot more money. And I said, what, for the tickets if we price them to maximize revenue. And I said, how much more revenue do you think you could bring in if you just let the market determine the price? And just, his rough take on it was we could probably raise revenue by 50%. So they have made a community-minded decision to keep prices low, below the market, in order to make it very affordable. And because of that, they operate, their revenue is $400,000 less than their revenue is $400,000 less than their income, but they raise that money. So they bring in enough money through all of their activities to cover expenses, even though they keep the ticket prices way below what they could realize if they price them like Tupelo at $125.
So the answer, my question is, they lose money. Is that the answer?
Given that they price the tickets way below market, yes.
The answer was that they make
Well,
money.
my
or they
answer
lose
is
money.
no, because they raise the money to make up the difference. So they bring in enough to cover everything.
All right.
Mr. Webb, do you want to also address this?
Specifically to answer that question, it's a nonprofit. They achieve an operating surplus every year. The bottom line of the organization is a surplus. You don't say in fund accounting for a nonprofit, you don't say profit or loss, you say surplus or deficit. That organization achieves an operating surplus every year that they budget. The reason that they do that is that they have an appropriate combination of earned income, ticket sales, rent, food and beverage operations, and so on, and contributed income, grants, donations, sponsorships, that cover more than their operating expenses. People often talk about the need for fundraising because we don't make enough money. That's just not the case. A theater always requires a combination of earned income and contributed income, except if you're in Broadway or Branson, Missouri, because they provide discounted access to community groups and they provide value to the community. And in return for that value, the community helps to sustain that facility. That's the basic economic proposition of a theater.
Okay, I understand that. I remember seeing your pro forma analysis of income and loss, or surplus and income, whatever you call it. You showed for your one director and 10 staff members a $1 million expense a year. Is that correct? Okay. You show $750,000 in sales of food services and ticket sales. Is that correct? You can look up your sheet. I remember it pretty well. Which leaves you a $250,000 deficit. You intend to make up that deficit by getting income from the $4 million. That's $150,000, which leaves you $100,000. The $100,000 you expect to make up through contributions. You can go look at your own paper, your own study.
You're misstating the whole budget. I'm
All
sorry.
right, then you
You've got
stated
it all
correctly.
backwards. Sorry. That's not what it says, right? There's an organization that has a certain amount of staff, that rents, provides subsidized access, that presents shows, that sustains itself. 3/4 of the budget is covered with earned income. The last quarter of the budget is covered with contributed income. It's a good model and a good target for a theater like this.
Okay. To the alderman here, they're probably all going to vote yes. All I say is, the report that never got published, there's supposed to be a single report published under the contract, but if you go through all the little pieces of stuff here and there, you find your pro forma. and your pro forma says $750,000 on ticket sales and food services and other rental, and it says $150,000 from the 4 million, you gotta have the 4 million, and $100,000 contributions. And if you don't get that, guess who has to make that up? The taxpayers in Nashua, because the taxpayers in Nashua own the facility. It's not privately owned like the Palace Theater. We have to make up. I have to make it up. All of you taxpayers have to make up the difference. That's a problem. Sure, go on Court Street. That building already exists. At least you don't have to make up the deficit plus the $1.1 million a year. Because that's not even part of the pro forma analysis of cost. That's a separate account just for the bond. It's Treasurer for debt handles. I have a problem with the cost. This is an 7,140 square foot facility, 7,140 square feet, an 800 square foot stage, 7,140. Why would it cost $15.5 million? Well, it's really $21 million, but somehow using the contributed funding source of $5.5 million. But let's take the $21 million. That's the real cost. $21 million is the projected cost from your architect. You can look at that data. For 8,000 square foot facility, how possibly can you spend $3,000 a square, over $2,000 a square foot? And the reason for this, you got this crazy building with 5 stories that have to be 59,000 square feet of facility have to be renovated to create an 8,000 square foot stage. And I'm not even sure that passes fire code because it all shows the egresses on one side of the stage, and that's in your document called an architectural sketch. Both egresses are on the same side of the building, and there is no central aisle. So there's 1,000 people standing there on the 8,000 square foot facility on the second floor, and 2 exits on one side of the building, and no central aisle. Now, if that's not a death trap, I don't know what a death trap is. I'm sure
Alderman T-Boom, that
the
was
fireman,
addressed.
I'm sure, well, that's my analysis of it, Mr. Chairman. The fire code will never accept what that drawing has. Or maybe it'll go down to another 1,000 people standing. Or maybe it'll even 500 tiered seating. They should bring the audience down, bring the ticket sales down. And obviously you can't charge what the Patriots are charging, which is what, $500 a ticket? Because you don't have that kind of a draw, no matter who you bring in. So there's a problem. There are lots of problems with this facility. You have Court Street, a beautiful facility. You completely ignore it because you got all these downtown people, and a lot of downtown merchants are right here. They're saying, bring in the stuff downtown. But there's no history of evidence that don't happen. In fact, the Courier, Mr. Chung, who was here, this city lost $1 million. They went to Manchester. And why? It lost it in the courts. Your attorney lost that in the court. Why? Because there was not sufficient interest in the arts to keep the $1 million here. These are problems. I'm not against performing arts. I love performing arts. As a kid, I used to perform in high school. But do it in Court Street. That's a known facility. That's got lots of parking. That's a cultural area of the city with the library. This thing in Alex Schuster is madness.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak in opposition? R 18001. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing on R 18001. And we were going to, in a moment, open the public hearing on R 18003.
So Duncan can leave, right? Duncan can leave, right?
Yep. All set. And just so you know, after we have the public hearing on R 003, R 18003, we will opening the budget meeting and voting on the two issues before us. Whoever is going to present for the city on R 18003, please come up.
Mr. LaFleur. Why don't you sit down here in Alderman
Alderman
O'Brien's
O'Brien's
seat?
seat.
Questions, answers. Yep. Fancy surface I can play with.
Okay, we'll have a brief overview of R 18003. Would you please introduce yourself and identify your position with the city?
I'm Jeff LaFleur, Superintendent of Solid Waste Department.
Okay. Address what the bond is for R 18003.
The bond, in a brief explanation, is the expansion of my setback barrier wall. The setback barrier wall is a differentiation between our trash and the residents of the city of Nashua. It's a 500-foot setback. It's been going on for 6 years now. It's something that the state is mandating me to do. When we designed the Phase 1-2 landfill, we designed it, or my predecessors designed it, to have a liner and be set and appropriated to take trash in that area. The state found that we could not put trash in that area. They anticipated getting a waiver, we never did. So now I have to build a barrier wall, which has been going on, like I said, for over 6 years now. The appropriation is almost a yearly thing, and it's going to continue on for the lifespan of the landfill. The second thing is the $350,000 is the expansion of our landfill gas system. That's another permitted process that I have to follow through with. Every time we, as the trash grows in the landfill, as we pack it in, we have to put layers of gas collection. We collect the gas, we send it to the methane plant, and they burn it off and make electricity. This helps with my odors. That's why we're on a schedule of a yearly expansion. The last thing is the $2,225,000 for 6 refuse trucks. We have a plan put into place, vehicle replacement plan schedule, and these trucks are up for replacement right now. They're at their end of life use. 3 of the trucks were actually up last year for last fiscal year. We deferred it to this year so we could just do it all as one bond. And as I said, it's time to replace these trucks. You're going to see more and more vehicles every year. We purchased all these vehicles all at once, and that's where our problem is that now they're all coming up at the same time, so I'm trying to stagger them out as much as possible to have the least impact on the city.
Any questions? Alderman Lopez.
Regarding the trash trucks, are the old ones going to be phased out, or would there be any kind of utility to them before the new ones?
Well, when we looked at, when our fleet manager looked at all of our trucks, we tried to come up with the plan, so when we do turn these in, there's some value left to them, so we will trade in the ones that we can. I'm going to keep 1 or 2 extras as backups. As anything, whenever we have collections, if the truck goes down, trash isn't getting picked up. So I want to have at least 1 or 2 spares kicking back, and those would become our backline trucks.
Alderman Karen.
Yes, are these going to be CNG trucks?
Yes, they are.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Seeing none, I'll open it up for people that would like to testify in favor of R 18003. Seeing no one, is there anyone that would like to speak in opposition to R 18003? Seeing no one, is there anyone additionally that would like to speak in favor of R 18003? Seeing no one, is there anyone else that would like to speak in opposition to R 18003? Seeing no one, I will call the public hearing on R 18003 to a close, and we'll take a short pause, and then we'll be starting the budget meeting. For those
What about bringing up the site?
All right, I'd like to open the Budget Committee meeting on January 22nd, 2018. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Okay, and that's 9:01 at the time, Mr. Chairman?
Mm-hmm.
Right, all right, correct. Alderman at Large, Wilshire.
Here.
Alderman at Large McCarthy.
Present.
Alderman at Large O'Brien is present. Alderman at Large Tenza. Here. Present. Alderwoman at Large Kelly. Here. Alderman Jan Smith.
Here.
Also present is Alderwoman Karen. Alderwoman Lopez. Alderman Lopez, excuse me. And
Still trying to
Alderwoman
enact.
Lizzie Goja. I got the Goja, sorry.
All right. Let's see. We elected the clerk. Roll call.
Yeah,
Jetty
and Clee.
Have public comment. Would anybody like to comment on anything that's coming before the committee this evening? I see no volunteers. Communications?
There are none.
Okay, I assume those two communications we had earlier for the public hearing.
Okay.
And we'll take note of those. Unfinished business,
There is none.
new business resolutions.
There is one, R 18001, authorizing the mayor and the city treasurer to issue bonds not to exceed the amount of $15,500,000 for the Performing Arts Center located at 201 Main Street. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to recommend final passage.
Okay, the motion on the floor is to recommend to the full board final passage of R 18001. Is there any discussion, comment? Seeing none, all in favor of,
Alderman Dowd.
Chairman.
yes? Oh, yes, Alderman Lopez.
Just wanted to comment that I'm in support of the motion and plan to support it on the floor. I did not endorse it at the time because I think it's important not to forget Court Street Theater is there, and that we should be looking at that as a project that needs a lot of attention, as was mentioned earlier tonight.
Okay. Any other? Alderman McCarthy.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on Court Street because it came up a couple of times in the public hearing, and I just went back over the numbers with Director Cummings. The numbers we've had for the Alex location have always been $15 million, and those are fairly solid. The number for Court Street, when we looked at it, was around 10 million. For 10 million, that gets us a 250-seat theater at Court Street and nothing bigger. So the economics of that in the pro forma simply don't work because there aren't enough seats. If we fill it every night of the year, it's still not going to generate enough revenue to come close to breaking even. It'll be much worse than the other location. In order to do anything with it, we would have to actually expand the building off of the site that it's on because the theater itself is up against the wall that is right on the property line. So that's a lot of the reasons why we looked at it. I believe there are advantages to having it on Main Street and not at Court Street. But the theater itself has a lot of challenges. It is nowhere near meeting code. There's a tremendous amount of cost to bring it up to code. And then you can renovate the theater, but you get 250 seats in it because that's how big it is. So.
Okay. Any other? Alderman Lopez?
I know Alderman McCarthy knows this, but I just was imagining what the public was thinking. I wasn't supporting Court Street as an alternative to the 201 Main Street site. I just wanted to remind the board that it's there. It's something that we own, and it does need attention. It's not going to make as big an impact economically downtown, so I believe that the Performing Arts Center is the most important critical decision to be made immediately, both for the benefit that it can provide to downtown and the need to get that particular site. I just want to keep it, the Court Street Theater, in the public mind.
Okay. Alderman Karen.
Yes, thank you. I, for one, was not in favor of this project when it first started because I had my concerns what happened with Court Street. But after doing a lot of research and listening to the experts on this, I find that the city of Nashua sometimes has a chance to do the right thing and we don't. We forget that you have to spend money to make money and to bring this vibrancy back to our community. So I am going to vote yes on this tomorrow. And I agree with Alderman Lopez. We can't forget about Court Street, but I think when Court Street was first put together, it was only supposed to be a small venue, and looking at the facility to incorporate having art groups come in and doing programming within the community, within that building, not so much to have a huge performing arts center. So I think that if we don't do it now, we never will. So we need to take that chance. Thank you.
Anyone else? Alderman Wiltshire?
Thank you. I was encouraged tonight to hear about the investments that are being made by Brady Sullivan and everyone else who's doing housing and, you know, looking at mill buildings to bring them up. And we owe it. We owe it to our community, our citizens, to be part of that, to be part of the investment in our community, because really, that's why we're here. We're here to make life better for the people of Nashua. I believe this is going to do that.
Yes, thank you. Although I'm not on the committee and I'm not voting this evening, I will be voting in favor of this tomorrow evening. As I look around the city at the facilities and the opportunities we have for our citizens, we have wonderful parks, we have our stadiums, we have Conway, and yes, we have Keefe and we have the Court Street Theater. But as we've heard before, they're very different venues and they serve very different functions from what we are proposing to fund this evening. And I believe that although it's located in downtown, it's going to be an asset for the host city. We don't talk about Mine Falls as being an asset for a particular ward. We don't talk about Roby Park as being an asset for Ward 8. And I think to look at the Performing Arts Center as only being an asset for downtown is short-sighted, because all of our properties and everyone's quality of life will be enhanced by having that venue there. So I think that this is the time to do it. And as Alderman Karen said, it would be very short-sighted to not move forward with this. That being said, from the beginning of my participation in these discussions, I've believed that we do need to keep Court Street in mind. And as Alderman McCarthy said, there are all sorts of code issues and other issues with that building that need to be addressed. But I think to look at it as a different venue for our community theaters is most appropriate. So by voting for the Performing Arts Center, I am in no way saying, let's give up on Court Street, but I think they will complement each other and strengthen our Ho downtown and our arts community. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yes.
Alderman Gidge?
Again, yes, this is not my committee. I'm going to speak for a couple people who are not here. This is something that, it's obviously it's needed. But what has been forgotten is you're having one art and you're not taking care of about 6 other arts. You do not have a full-time gallery. Now, New Hampshire is not a good place for artists. First, it is 45th to the United States, or 44th, for state funding arts. When we researched getting artists coming back here, you didn't have to go far. Lowell, Massachusetts is 111,000 people. They have over 300 studios for artists to rent, all rented with a waiting list. New Hampshire, 1.23 million. We don't have 200. And when you put something like this in, and you have 5 to 6 different types of artists, where are they going to go? And I will vote for it, but it's short-sighted. It truly is. And no offense, the Courier, I think this is very important. But I think I'd rather have artists in there, artists who can showcase their work. Where are they going to go? Lowell? So I will vote for it, but I did want to get that off my mind. And this is not my committee, but I sat in. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Alderman McCarthy?
Yeah, I just want to address that point. We've had discussions with the Courier already about the gallery space, and I've had some discussions with other local artists who have operated studios. The intent is to put a gallery space on the first floor, which would be usable by the Courier for they believe they would program it for 2 to 3 months a year with using some of the funds from the endowment that has been mentioned in the news recently. In the other times of the year, that gallery would be ours to program with local artists however we choose. So I think we can design and create a space that meets both of those needs on the first floor of the Art Center, and I think that has been the intention since we started discussing it.
Now, let me just say, if it's okay, that's wrong. You have to have a full-time gallery. I was one of the people who wrote the bill studying the economic impact of the arts and culture in the state of New Hampshire. I know you look at Nashville like this, we've looked like this. We know where it makes it, where it doesn't make it. Nashville's hot, there's no question about that. But you got so many artists. And no offense, with the Courier, and I know they've got that money, but I'm sure there's a lot of training and other things that they can do. But the artists we have here, where are they going to go? Lowell? So, thank you very much. I do appreciate it.
So I would take this as one step in a good direction, and if the state is so far behind, I think that probably resides in Concord to help energize the rest of the state. Alderman Lopez?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out from personal experience, national artists can put their work in the Courier. I've participated in a couple of shows, so it's not necessarily mutually exclusive. The Courier might even be willing to organize national shows for us. And there are gallery events, activities, that kind of stuff. There's a lot of studio space in Nashua. The Picker Building isn't the only studio collective. There's another one over by Make It Labs. So I'm sure Nashua could do a lot more to make a more friendly environment for visual artists, but I think raising the prominency of art, period, to the point where its economic impact is recognized, that's something I think every artist understands, that you just need a better marketplace to sell your wear.
Any other? Alderman Tenzo?
Thank you. I just wanted to say, I think this Arts Center has been an ongoing debate since last fall. It's been talked about. A lot of questions have been raised, and I just wanted to thank Director Cummings, Mr. Webb, for coming again, and the mayor coming again tonight to go over, give us more information yet again. I'm sure they're intimately involved and knowledgeable about the details. It's good for the rest of us to hear it out in public, and hopefully people are watching this debate. One of the things I learned last week at the Planning Economic Development Committee meeting from Director Cummings was that, downtown and this Performing Arts Center is really an underdeveloped part of our city. And it's an area of opportunity for us to invest in order to attract more money to bring into the city and reduce our taxes and grow our tax base. So I'm in support of this project. Another thing that Mr. Ramsey said tonight, which I think is important, I hope we really remember, because there's talk about this being a for-profit venture for the city, is that this is really a community arts center. I hope that when the committee gets together to put together bylaws or proposals for how the facility is going to be run, should it pass, that we really remember to include a lot of youth programming, free youth programming, and make sure that we can, get those kids who, may not have an outlet in sports, may not have an outlet in the various other activities that the city offers. We can get them involved and make this a place that they can be proud of as well, a place that they want to come back to after they've done high school and college.
Alderman Schmidt?
Thank you. Ward 1 is very special to me since it's my ward. And when talking with people there, invariably, there are two questions. One is, will it raise my taxes? This is very important. And we found out will not. This is not going to affect your taxes at all. The other is, what is taking so long? Why isn't this happened? They're equating this with the Broad Street Parkway. It was delayed and delayed and delayed. And finally, when it went in, people said, I can get to downtown in 10 minutes now. It is so much easier for me. Why did we ever delay? And I think that we're at that point now with the Arts Center. It's time to move it forward. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, Alderman Kelly.
I also want to thank everyone for really doing a great job with the presentation and answering some of those questions. I know that I heard them when I was out speaking to people in last year, and in conversations downtown. So I think we did a good job of making sure we addressed some of those questions for people. One of the things that really struck me in the comments tonight, and also kind of as ongoing conversation, is we don't have those beaches, we don't have the mountains. Like, what do we have as Nashua? And I think this is an opportunity to be a place where we really welcome people to the state of New Hampshire, and bring that cultural piece to not only us as a city, but a whole state. So I think that that opportunity is something that we need to seize, and the timing is right. People said that a lot tonight, so thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing no one? All in favor of R 18001, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next order of business?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we have R 18003, authorizing the mayor, the city treasurer, to issue bonds not to exceed the amount of $2,575,000 for various improvements at the Solid Waste Department, Four Hills Landfill, and the purchase of 6 refuse trucks. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to recommend final passage.
Okay, the motion on the floor is to recommend final passage of R 18003. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of recommending final passage of R 18003 to the full board, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Clerk?
Thank you. For new business, we have none, Mr. Chairman.
General discussion? None. Public comment? None. Remarks by Alderman? I just want to point out, for those of you that don't have cell phones, the president signed and the government's back in business.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes?
Okay, just a little bit of house cleaning. Due to my tillage mix-up between Alderman Melissa Goger and Alderman Lopez, I did not record, but for the record, Alderman Jett, Alderman Garthright, Alderman Gidge, and Alderman Cleed were also present.
Okay. I don't think we need a non-public. Do I hear a motion?
Mr. Chairman,
Before that, yes.
The name is Jetty.
Okay.
Jetty.
Alderman
Jetty.
O'Brien. Thank you.
He'll get it. Alderman Wiltshire.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion is to adjourn. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned at 9:20.